Those for my. It's coming back. It's coming back. Here's first line. Yeah, I told her.
Hold up to 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Go ahead and do commission member roll.
John Morrison,
Here.
Teresa Keller here, Joe Martin,
Here.
Ben Christensen,
Here.
Nick Jameson, Alan Hughes,
Here.
Bree Fry here. And let the record show Richard Crouch
Here.
and Deshaun Birdsell, county attorney.
Right. Got the agenda in front of us. Get a motion to approve the agenda for today.
I'll make that motion.
Get a second.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Hey, John, I wouldn't mind discussing, last time we met, I think we talked about, this was more of a work session, is that a correct statement? Did we talk about that? This was gonna be a work session, not potentially something to approve to move on?
Yeah, I think we did talk about being somewhat of a work session or having a work session.
And the agenda, this shows a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors for approval. So I think that's something to discuss potentially. Matt, do you have any take on that?
It's not on the agenda as that. But you can, as the commission, if you choose that that's not your motion at the end of the night, then that's not your motion at the end of the night.
Okay.
But the goal is hopefully today, I think, just reviewing what we're at right now and kind of the staff report that we'll go through with everybody in the crowd, that we're in a pretty good spot to hopefully make that motion.
Everybody have a chance to review the previous meeting minutes? Get a motion to approve those?
I guess it's still my take that I don't know how we can pass this with how we talked about it last meeting, but that's just my take. I know we talked about working on it and then discussing it. I know, Matt, you're kind of disadvantaged because you weren't at the meeting, so.
And Alan, the recording did not reflect that either.
It didn't say that.
It did not add,
Well, it stopped.
it stopped.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
So that is why everything is reading the way it is reading.
okay.
Good information up to a certain point. So we did the best we could with the information that we had.
So I guess I would motion to change the agenda to where today's a work session, something that we don't move on to the Board of Supervisors. Would be my motion. To change the agenda to where today's not a day that we're gonna recommend it to the Board of Supervisors. That's the way I understood it last meeting, was we were gonna work on it.
You cannot change the published agenda. You don't have to approve to pass on to the Board of Supervisors, but you cannot change the already published agenda.
Okay,
But you, like I said, if you want to make it a work session, there's nothing that requires you to pass this on. You can make it a work session, but you cannot retroactively change the agenda that's been published.
We didn't do anything about the minutes. That's what I'm trying to get a motion on the minutes from the previous meetings.
Do we just note that they're incomplete?
Yeah. we can note
Yeah,
it.
just the one.
Note that they're just incomplete based on the recording stopping.
Yes, I would recommend that you note that they are incomplete due to the stopping of the recording. Yes.
With that notation, I make a motion to approve.
Those in favor? Introduce Chris is with Confluence. It's put together the comprehensive plan.
Chair and commission members, my name is Christopher Shires, principal at Confluence, the consultant firm hired by the county to run you through the process of making 2 updates to your comprehensive plan. Give me a second while I screen share. Hold on. 1 second here. Okay, let's jump right into it. For this presentation, what I want to do is, recognize this, 1 second, look at the technology. I love the new space, the new technology, this is all great. There we go, okay. So what I want to do is just do a quick recap of the project schedule, what we're trying to accomplish, and then run through the changes we have made to the draft future land use plan per some of the feedback and comments we received from our last planning commission meeting. At your last meeting, it was a public hearing. Not only did you receive a presentation from me, you also received some public comment and feedback. And of course, like you've already discussed, this is a public meeting of the planning commission. Really, you have a lot of options. What I would encourage you to do is listen to my presentation, ask me questions, and then give us your detailed feedback of edits and changes you want to make. If we're able to make them on the fly and you're comfortable with them, then I think you sure could adopt a resolution that we have drafted for you to recommend the version of the land use plan, the future land use plan that you want to send forward. And if you're uncomfortable, you sure could continue to a future meeting date, either uncertain or certain. I would encourage you that if you're not comfortable adopting a resolution tonight, that you continue it to a specific meeting date so that the members of the public participating know really what the next steps are. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the project schedule. It was a 4-phase process. And so here we are in the home stretch of that finalizing the plan and adoption. Previously, we did, of course, create a renewable energy chapter to reinforce some of the updates and changes the county made to your zoning code regulations related to renewable wind and renewable energy, specifically wind farms and for solar farms. Really a confirmation that in most cases, utility scale wind is not something allowed in this county. Just at a glance, there's quite a lot of process to get here. We're going a little past a year now, and that's okay. We don't want to race it here at the end. We do want to make sure that you guys are comfortable. So really the next step after this meeting or after the commission is comfortable with this is forwarding on a recommendation for the board to review and consider at a public hearing. So let's jump into changes since last time. One thing we heard, and let me move that again. Less conspicuous corner. We created a new land use category. As you know, the future land use map is made up of different land use categories. In this case, we created a new one, called it the Less Hills Protection Area, to really reflect the Less Hills Formation, a significant portion of it in Mills County, and to be a little more consistent with what your current future land use map shows today. What we do identify in this is an area that should be preserved and protected, but it's not an area that's say devoid of any development. It just needs to be development that does not negatively impact this sensitive landform. So it would be rational to see some continued development of, say, single-family residential homes that are kind of following in line with the topography and protecting the natural ground cover. This is a screenshot of the previous future land use map that we shared at the meeting on the 22nd, January 22nd. All those land use colors, of course, mean something. The largest one, that light green, being an ag open space land use category. Kind of the pinkish, peachish color around all the cities, reflecting kind of their planning boundary or their growth boundary. Yellow is rural residential. Red is some type of commercial business. And then kind of everything in between, floodplain, conservation areas, flood buyout parcels. So this is the update. And so based on the last meeting, did hear a concern of wanting to have a Luss Hills land use category to identify significant areas of Luss Hills formation. Those two green areas on the north and south side of the county, following along the Luss Hills, are consistent with what's shown in the current future land use plan currently in adoption with the county. The next biggest change is we heard a desire to include a more significant amount of area for rural residential development, rural single-family subdivisions, rural housing. If I jump back, you might recall in this case, we had a very limited area, really reflecting the portions of the county north of Glenwood that have a lot of rural acreages and rural single-family development. In this case, the area was expanded greatly based on the feedback I heard at the meeting to be more in line with what the future land use plan currently shows for the county. Did make some recommendations, kind of pull back from an area that's kind of in the floodplain. So it's pretty close to the current land use boundaries from the county's current adopted comprehensive plan. The next one here. The other change was the expansion of the business park area in the north end of the county along the interstate. This area identified right here. That was a desired expansion that I heard about. Plus, pull back of that business park development area, kind of right at 34 and I-29. Thought that southwest quadrant was not ideally developable. So based on that feedback, again, we pulled back that area of the map. Okay, before I go on, any questions on the map changes? Not from the audience, I should say from the planning commission. This is a public hearing, but unless the commission opens up the public hearing, I should say this is a public meeting, but unless the commission opens up the public hearing, it's not necessarily a meeting for public comment. So that would be something for the commission to discuss if they wish to do that. But any questions of the commission on the land use plan?
Yeah, you talked about on the west side of, on the northwest part of the county, the west side of the interstate. You were hearing feedback that you wanted more industrial up there. Is that what you're saying?
That is exactly it. And so this little area right here, we did expand based on feedback I received at our meeting on the 22nd. So if I zoom back, that's what it is right now, or the previous version. And you can kind of see how it drops down there.
Yeah, what I think in that area, just, I think there's quite a few solar leases already signed in that area. And I think that would be an industrial area where solar isn't allowed. So it might be somewhat, we might be trying to do some thinking here that we gotta be careful with probably. Like if you've already signed up your land for a solar farm and then the new land use plan puts it industrial and solar farms aren't allowed in that space, I'd say that's an issue we may be up against.
Something for the commission to consider then, what you think is appropriate. I would caution you, it's not necessarily a taking unless they truly have entitlement in place, meaning a permit to build, an approval.
What if they have like a signed lease?
That is a private property owner agreement. It might be a bit of a challenge for somebody to make a claim against the county. Entitlement lies with actual permit or site plan approval, plat approval, special use permit approval. Yeah, but it doesn't mean it's not an important issue for you to consider.
This other question, as a committee member, I don't recall discussing the expanded residential. It went from limit new residential from the January draft to promote and support.
Oh, and I will get to those goals and policy statements. Absolutely. I just want to make sure there wasn't anything on the maps. But yeah, I'd be happy to
Quite
go
an
on to that.
expansion. Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, on Alan, to your point on that, the commercial solar is allowed in the industrial area, and I think that's the reasoning on dropping that down there. You do have to get a conditional use permit, but that's gonna be a conditional use permit in every area that commercial solar goes to go in. So I think that was kind of the reasoning that I heard behind marking it out further was for that solar. So to
There
actually,
you go.
For some reason, I thought we voted. There was such limited industrial that we weren't gonna promote solar panels in industrial. It's the way but maybe that's been changed since then for some reason.
you could go either way with it, because it says that the solar, commercial utility scale solar systems shall require a conditional use permit if they're within the agricultural zoning district, the ag residential zoning district, industrial zoning districts. So, but it's prohibited in all other zoning districts of Mills County. So any place you go to put a commercial scale one, you're gonna ask for that conditional use permit
Okay,
or,
so it's allowed in industrial.
yeah,
Or.
as a conditional use.
Okay, thank you.
Matt, thank you for clarifying that, because I did not know that answer specifically, because I know we didn't want to make sure the certified site was potentially would allow for utility scale solar.
Yeah, and I think in that mega site area, I don't know the specifics, but I think when those leases were signed, they don't have showers. I think they exempted that.
Okay.
Solar. I don't know. Maybe somebody else will ask that when the phone.
Other map related questions? It's not that we can't come back, but I just thought kind of going on the way. Let me cover a few other things. So the document, the plan was updated to reflect that new land use category, the Less Hills protection area. So in these two charts, we are kind of doing the compare and contrast between existing land uses, how the county is currently developed, and then should we see a full build out based on this future land use plan, what those percentages are. Now, that of course is very unlikely. We always designate far more land use than you're likely to use up within any kind of a planning period, but we are trying to look very far into the future. So you can kind of see the percent breakouts. Of course, ag land being that significant category and continuing to be that most major category of land use in Mills County. And then did update the zoning compatibility matrix. And last time we talked about the importance of this, in particular to the planning commission, so that when somebody's in before you for rezoning, we first look at that future land use plan and then this matrix for some guidance on what would be an appropriate zoning district. And so if somebody has across the top, a ag open space land use category on the map, that's what their property is shown. Then you can see the different types of zoning districts that would be appropriate. C is for compatible, PC for partially compatible. So ag would be a compatible zoning district. Ag residential would be a partially compatible zoning district. And so in this case, we wanted to show how Less Hills Conservation, the Less Hills Protection Area kind of falls within that. Just the Less Hills Conservation Development would be one of those permitted zoning types or very compatible zoning types. This would be a document or a matrix that would update over time as you may make some adjustments to your zoning code regulations. All right, so with that, how about I jump into some of the changes? So we have a series of goals and policy considerations. Again, a comprehensive plan, and in this case, the future land use plan chapter are guiding documents, are recommending documents that are not law. But they serve a tool to help give us some guidance, some direction, so we have a little bit of continuity on our decision-making or recommendations. The Board of Supervisors can ultimately do what they want, as you can make a recommendation what you want. My encouragement would be that if you're deviating from a policy or a goal of the comprehensive plan, you make a clear statement as to why. And if you're deviating from what the future land use plan shows, that you actually make an amendment to it to make it consistent. You may have somebody come before you with a really great idea. Everybody agrees it's a great idea, but it doesn't fall along the future land use map. I would amend that land use map as a part of the rezoning process, so that you're always consistent with your maps. And things do change over time. This map, at least as it's proposed today, is a snapshot in time today of what we think are some appropriate land uses long-term. So with all that caveat on these different goals, I'm gonna run through kind of the big changes. And really the direction or the comments I received were, can we do a little bit of a softening? We had very strong shall language, and can we change it to more of a should and encouraging language? And then there were some more specific things in there. So goal one, we should encourage and focus rural residential expansion in key areas identified on the future land use plan. That previous language is a little more strict in that we should prohibit it only to areas within rural residential expansion. And so this case was requested, could we soften it? And then policy number one kind of falls along with that to support, promote and support new residential development to those areas identified on the future land use plan, so the rural residential, and discourage single family rural residential subdivisions in areas that fall, say, within the ag open space category. And then under policy number three, which is a little more of a design standard, any new subdivisions should be designed to accommodate future development, including providing through street connections, thinking, through street circulation as be necessary to ensure that we can orderly develop the remaining property over time. We had a shall instead of a should. And so here we're recommending a should be designed versus shall. I'm happy to run through them all. If you want to come back and say, I like, I don't like, or change this or why. So on goal two, this is related, instead of on residential, it's on commercial. So commercial expansion should be supported around our highway interchanges. And a little bit of that is to acknowledge those highway interchanges are valuable. The highest and best use is something more intense than, say, a single family house. So where they're undeveloped, let's try to be a little more picky. And then that policy number two, this relates a little bit to a design standard. This is something we did not talk about at your meeting in specifics, but it was something that came up. So we want to require new commercial and business development to connect to and be accessed by paved roads. What we added, and require any minor subdivision of 3 or more separate lots to share an access onto surface roads. With a caveat, it's kind of based on those surrounding land uses and caveat and traffic counts. So maybe not in all cases, but some cases it would be an important. And that's based on some recent development activity that's been causing a little bit of pain.
I worked with the county engineer to come up with that language to make sure that that was gonna meet what he was kind of coming up against with the different access drives that were being requested. And so he felt comfortable with that language to be able to help support him in his decision-making process, and say yes.
3 didn't change anything. Goal 4 didn't change anything as far as through policies 1 through 6. We did add a number 10, and this is definitely based on feedback received at that meeting on the 22nd. A recommendation to update the county zoning regulations to reflect the recommendations within this plan, and to complete a comprehensive review and update to the corridor overlay district to ensure those rules and regulations meet the needs and goals of the county. One thing that was acknowledged is that currently that ordinance, so those regulations may not be meeting what you need. I think there are some conflicts with permitted uses as well as design standards. And so I agree with some of the feedback we heard at the last meeting, and I think that would be a valuable thing to take a fresh look at. Especially now that you got Matt here, you can do that. So with that, that was all the changes to those goals and policy considerations. Anything you want me to go through specific, any feedback you have for me?
That sent out some changes for goal 4. Are those in this new revision?
Chris didn't get a chance to see those. I sent
okay.
those
Okay.
directly to the commission and to the board of supervisors to check out after I went through and reviewed it. And that's where I was gonna kind of step in and go over the staff report with you all to help kind of describe those out.
Okay.
I was gonna go through that right before new business. That's right.
Do it well on that.
So we kind of to the board discussion piece of it, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. If you guys have questions or comments or discussion, I can sit down and take notes.
And I'll just take it for everybody. I'm Matt Wyatt. Grew up in Mills County, graduated from Glenwood. I've been up in Pottawatomie County for the last 21 years or 20 years working in the rural planning field of it. I'm down here helping Mills County out in their planning department now. I know several of you on the commission and a few of you here in the room tonight. So I appreciate that. On the staff report that I submitted to you all on this, kind of the top of page 2. Start there. I did just kind of laid out some crucial pieces about land use plans. I know that there's pieces of it that you already do know, or all of it that you know and understand. You know, the land use plan is a great guide for the zoning department, for the board of supervisors and developers coming into the area. But it is definitely not a plan that's chiseled in stone, right? That we set out there and we say, now that we've adopted this, it never changes. It is a living plan. It grows and modifies with the county as the county grows and modifies. And there was things I discovered through this process that I did not know for Mills County, and the extension of the utilities that are out there in the county that support the housing that's out there. Mills County has a strong housing background to it. And just knowing that it is so far ahead of the game with water extensions, with sewer extensions out there, the paved road pieces of it, I think those are all great things that came out through the last land use plan that went through. And obviously, we all know that we're in a great position to continue to grow and new businesses coming into the area. So all of this is good timing for Mills County. Pages 1 through 4 of what we went through tonight, is really kind of the introduction and the legal justifications for it. Page 5 is your existing land use map. It's always good to kind of review that, make sure the accuracy Chris went over. You have page 6, which is your population data estimates. Pages 7 through 13 on the public input part of this. As much public as we have here tonight. I mean, this has been a great process for public input. You normally do not see this kind of public engagement on this. So I commend, all of the work that went into to drive this public input that has come into it. The last one that I was involved with, one person showed up throughout the entire piece of it. And, those multiple meetings that you just sat in a room, hoping people would show up, advertise as much as you can. So you have a really engaged group of residents down here, business owners. That's fantastic. Your key considerations, that was all gone through, that's been laid out in there. The real meat of what to talk about on this tonight is the comments that I heard from the recording of it and understanding that this map is important. It is important going forward, and it does need to be really scrutinized to say, where are our utility extensions at? Does that match with what we're throwing up here for future land use planning? Where are some of our, the businesses, the solar leases that we know that we haven't, that are going in there and driving that down because we already know that they're there. Protecting the interstate interchanges that are out there for the community to make sure that the proper development is going to go in around those interstate interchanges. All really important things to consider as we look at this map. But that's not to say that your developer doesn't come in here with that great idea and it comes back before you for a modification to this land use map to support that new development that is there and financially feasible to be put in for them. You don't ever want to potentially turn those away if they're there. So it is a map that can change. And then having those urban fringe areas around each of the communities, this is happening, I think, all across the state of Iowa. These smaller towns, the small communities are really becoming more engaged in what is happening in their urban fringe. Because something could potentially get placed there that for the small community, that was their growth path. That was the easiest way for them to extend out their utility places that were there. And so they are paying a lot more attention up on to what's going on and really wanting to know with it. By state code, they get a 2-mile jurisdictional boundary out there that for any subdivision requests. And his past history, did many of the towns get those, submitted to them? If somebody was dividing up pieces of ground out there, probably not. Maybe they did on that 1/2 mile, but now they're really wanting to see that 2-mile. And I know I talked to Malvern the other day, and they really are engaged and they want to see that 2-mile out there. So if somebody's going to divide up some land within 2 miles, they want to be able to have that approval process through city council and the mayor sign off on it before it comes to the county and gets signed off on. And as the county side of it, our area is only ever going to get smaller, right? Because the towns are going to absorb those in and they're going to grow. And that's what we hope to see. And to be able to support them in growing it, because you're going to get your affordable housing in your communities. You're not so, your other style of housing, your $500,000 house, they're growing faster and faster. That is what you're going to see out in the rural counties and in some of your smaller communities. But the smaller communities is really where you're hoping to get that more dense housing, and that is really happening down here in Mills County with that influx of housing that you're seeing. I know you did lose some housing on the 2019 floods. It was devastating for a lot of our communities, but being able to gain that back quickly like you are, I think that's fantastic for the county's growth, and it's going to really help that housing cycle. You're gonna have the cheaper house, the more affordable houses in there for people to start out with, and then you build the bigger houses so that middle range can have that step up and that cycle can get going again. I'll bore you real quick with my sales pitch on it. So I feel like our housing cycle here is broken. You hear in the media all the time, housing market's about to take a dip, housing market's about to dive off. In our area, we lack housing stock. So our prices right now, they're either gonna stay stagnant or they're gonna keep on climbing up until we get people to come in and build a subdivision that has, 100 homes to free up some things and to get that cycle moving again to where people can make those steps in housing and the interest rates kind of start coming around. That's what I believe that we're gonna see in our area. But to have that strict nosedive off, we don't have the stock there sitting there, a bunch of housing stock sitting there empty. I mean, these houses are selling as fast as they're going up. So to have the influx of housing that you're seeing is really great for that housing cycle in Mills County. When we get down to what we really want to talk about tonight is that policy and the goal piece of this. Specifically, I think we were good. There was a lot of talk last time in the recording that I could hear about just making sure that it was positive language that was going in there, encouraging language. And to be able to, because it is kind of your front door, your welcoming mat for people who are coming into the community to see, hey, do I want to do a development here? You want to sound like you're positive around those things. And goal number 4 really became kind of heavy on the policy side of it. I think we got up to, there was 10 different ones in there. And so I went through those pieces of it to see how can we combine those 10 and encourage some, change some of the language around to a little bit more positive thing. So starting at number 1, we have discourage urban sprawl. And I feel like that message, we really have that message there in policy number 2. And so we could probably hold out and delete out policy number 1 on there. Policy number 2, we have encourage development within the urban fringe. Policy 2 can be combined with policy number 5 as well. And then we can add in there, encourage development proposed within the urban fringe, infill development, and rehabilitation of existing properties in Mills County with connections to city water, sanitary sewer service that could be annexed. So we could take those 3 policies and really push them down into the 1 with a little bit, more positive language, encouraging language to people on that part of it. Policy number 3, discourage development in the floodplain. I think that's definitely responsible. It's easy to have in there. You do want to discourage development in the floodplain. Development in floodplain is difficult. It's more costly and winds up kind of being taxing, as we know, on emergency services and things like that. So I don't necessarily have a problem with number 3. Yeah, with number 3 on there. Number 4, restrict development within the Less Hills. Can you scroll down one more page? Restrict development and the uses and activities within the Less Hills that may negatively impact its natural formation. The Less Hills, I mean, they're a sensitive site. We know that all the way up and down Iowa. The restriction of the development in there and the uses and activities in there, it does help on, it's kind of a flip side coin to it. When you look at some of the complaints that come out of there about adding motocross tracks and stuff like that in the Less Hills, you want to have some verbiage in there about the uses and activities in the Less Hills that negatively impact it. On the development side of it though, my understanding is that we do have some really good infrastructure pieces that kind of run up the highway here and into that quadrant. So what I would think that you would expect to see in those areas is if you were going to do development, that it would run, what you'd want to have is development that's low impact to the area and that runs with the topography of the area. It's not something that you would see somebody go in there and do a clean sweep, knock out all the trees. And so if a proposed development came in, you would want to, as it would go through the review process, you would see that that we'd be working with them to make sure that the roads run with the contours of the land, that the trees are staying in place as things are being built up, and that, it's probably not, it would not be as dense as what you would see in another area because you're trying to keep that natural beauty of the area. So larger lots, things like that. Number 5, again, that would be a policy that was combined with number 2. So I think we delete that one out of it. Number 6. My recommendation on that is to delete number 7 and go with number 6 on there. They say the same thing, but number 6 has more of a positive tone to it. Can you scroll down one more page on there? So number 7 is basically telling you to discourage the unnecessary conversion of agricultural land to be built in the environment throughout the county. And can you scroll back up real quick? Number 6, we have maintain agriculture and open space as the dominant land use in the unincorporated areas outside of the urban fringe. So you really have, you're kind of doubling down on what it's saying there. And I think if we just go with number 6, it really it covers you then for number 7, and we can pull that out. Policy number 8, I did have a question on, was protect the large continuous primaries of farmland within Mills County through zoning and other voluntary incentive-based programs. And it was really that voluntary incentive-based programs that I think, if they're not lined up in the county, we should probably scratch that piece of it out and just go with protection of the large continuous farmland through Mills County, through zoning. That part of it makes me a little bit uneasy as well, because if you had a farmer come in there and talk to you, they're gonna tell you that, you're not zoning them out. So they're ag exempt when it comes to zoning. And, but it would be more through our subdivision process of that in those areas. I think so. I think we would change that to something with that has to do more with the subdivision ordinance versus the zoning ordinance to protect those larger pieces that the towns can take in or annex when they needed to voluntarily, hopefully, on those parts of it, rather than through the zoning piece of it. Policy number 9, my suggested wording change here is to reduce the potential conflicts between ag land uses and other land uses through setbacks and other creative strategies. We don't necessarily want to put it out into the world that there's automatic conflicts between ag land uses and other incompatible uses. So I think the potential of conflicts between there really helps that one out to reduce the potential conflicts between agricultural land uses and other incompatible land uses through setbacks. I think that gets it to a better place on that part of it. And then policy number 10, I think I think you all hit it right on the head there. I think, and I talked to the board of supervisors about this earlier today. I do feel as though that corridor overlay district is really strict and very urban core style of development regulation that comes in there. My example of it was, there is a project that's out there right now that they're trying to get through on there. So they have to notify the building or zoning person 14 days ahead of when they submit their documents. That, hey, I'm gonna submit some documents to you. So then they come and they submit those documents in. Then they have a 60, then this person has a 60-day process that they can sit there and review those documents. So you start adding up all these timeframes on there, and then you start looking at how this project's getting pushed down the road of being able to happen in that corridor overlay district. You could time some people out, or you could miss out on some opportunities on there. And I think that there's a lot to be said to go back through, and that would be done at the conclusion of the land use plan, to go back through the corridor overlay district and really look at what is needed, what's not. And there is a line in there that makes it seem a little bit discretionary, but I think you would have a hard time convincing the person in the job to use that discretion without being fearful of it coming back to them sooner, a year down the road, somebody else comes in and, well, they were discretionary over here, and maybe they say, something different on this next job site, and it's just gonna wind up in the board of supervisors hearing room. And that person's gonna, be feeling like whether they made a mistake or they did something wrong. So when I look at codes, I don't like to think of them as discretionary. I think, it's either there or it's not. So corridor overlay district definitely will get a relook once we get the land use plan updated in there. So but that kind of brings it to the conclusion. I think with what Chris has presented so far on the future land use plan, really it's great. And I think we're to a point, like I said, we can get through those policy changes on goal number 4, that the county would be sitting in a pretty good spot for property owners, developers, and moving ahead. The next step in this process is a large look at going back through and rewording some of the zoning ordinances and subdivision ordinances to make sure it matches up to that. But it would make, I'd be comfortable with where it's at on it, would be my recommendation on that part of it. The only other part I didn't describe, and I talked more about it in the staff report, was the chart in there where it's compatible, partially compatible on that piece of it. And in the staff report, I do kind of describe that out as, in terminology, it's just easier for myself to understand as I look at it, is really it's conditionally, right? So if somebody came in and if it says compatible, that's great. If it's partially compatible, that means that it could potentially work there with some conditions. And that could be the conditions on of making sure that you leave the natural rolling shapes of the land, or whatever pieces of that are going to protect that Les Hills views of it. So that's how I kind of described it out in my own mind, because we deal a lot with conditional use permits and how you can go through and just tag different things to make sure that it adds that higher level of scrutiny to the project, or you can add a few things on. And as long as you're consistent with those, it works. The consistency is really that backup key to it. So as the request would come in, and then it would really be starting off as square one, as, okay, we've asked for this the first time around, the next one that comes in, we're going to ask for the same thing, and it might be worded in a different way, but it's going to reach the same goals of that.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have any questions or comments with what Matt presented?
Matt, do you think table 1.4 should just be struck? With the PCs and Cs, to where, like you said, the language should contradict with our zoning ones?
No, I do think that you want, because of the way the Mills County's ordinance is set up, it has a lot of tables in there just like this.
Okay.
showing you whether it's a conditional use or not. And so I do think that this will align well with it, and you'll be able to, as the decision-making process, when the staff gets ready to prepare those reports to you, they're going to reference this table here in the land use plan and how they feel as though it is compatible or partially compatible. If it's partially compatible, they should have a list of conditions that go along with it to bring it up to that compatible. But I do think that you definitely want to use this, because this is going to be one of the pieces that gets a lot of use in that land use plan, is this table.
Anyone else on the board have questions or comments? No. So now get into further board discussion regarding the comprehensive plan. Further discussion.
I guess, John, my thought is maybe open it up and then we can talk after the crowd has talked, if that's okay with everybody.
I agree.
So go ahead and have public comment.
I'd like to start if possible.
Yeah, do you want to stand and say your name?
My name is Mark Hughes. I've always lived in Glenwood, built homes and do a little bit of development in the area. Can you put up that most current map up there? Is that possible, or is that the most current map?
That one. Which one are you talking about?
Most
I think the one-
recent one.
The proposed?
That one, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So, when I look at that map up there, a couple things that draw my attention. You look at Tabor down there in the south with just that little bit of pink. Then you look at Malvern over there to the right with a little bit of pink around it and surrounded by a lot of the light green. On the light green, is it safe to assume it pretty much says, we don't want you building there. We don't want houses there, pretty much farmland, no houses. Is that somewhat correct? In the light green?
So Chair, a couple options for you. You can take public comment, close the public hearing, and we'll take notes and answer. If there's something you want us to answer directly, what I'd suggest is you say, Matt, Chris, would you respond to that?
Okay, yeah, Matt or Chris, can you all respond to that?
I'd be happy. So consistent with your current future land use map, and frankly, your zoning is, short answer is yes. And so areas identified as ag open space are not ideal, or at least in this planning thought, for single family subdivisions, rural subdivisions.
When I see that with Tabor to the south and Malvern there with both of those communities and schools I know wanting to grow, I think this is just a kick in the teeth to Malvern or Tabor, what you've done. You've allowed growth around Glenwood with the yellow, but you haven't allowed that to Malvern or Tabor.
Is Tabor the one, Tabor's all the way down there at the bottom, right in the middle?
Right, but to the east there, I mean,
Oh, because of that eastern portion of it?
yeah, I mean, you're probably, that pink probably is no more than a mile outside of town, is it? On that map?
And so, you know, if I can share, I might just respond because I think that's a really good comment. Originally, when we first just kind of did the blind start, is we did a 2-mile buffer, kind of the typical 2-mile review territory for any city. And really around some of the smaller communities, it seemed too large. And so some of the original feedback we got was, that's way too large, scale those kind of buffer areas around the cities. Those are really the city's growth areas, but you know, in no near-term, long-term future will some of these smaller communities see that level of growth. And so that was some of the direction or feedback we received early on. So sure, could we make that buffer around Malvern all the way out to 2 miles? Absolutely, that could be something, you know, even with Tabor there. Tabor does kind of benefit by having that large area of single family, rural residential, I should say, kind of shown around it now.
How big would you say that buffer around Malvern is?
That is a 1-mile buffer.
And Malvern, I think, has tried hard and have done a great job trying to grow. They're growing their schools. They passed the bond issue. And I think Malvern is probably a little envious of Glenwood over time, of the growth and so forth they've had. And someday, sometime, I think Malvern would like to be more of a Glenwood, have a larger school. And I know where most of the people here on the board live. And if you were to take yourself and place yourself in Malvern and have Malvern have the same hopes that Glenwood has in the growth, I don't know if any of you would be able to build your current residence outside that, the pink area in Malvern. It would restrict from what you currently enjoy where you live. That's not gonna be allowed for the people in Malvern in the future with that map.
And also, if I can elaborate, Chair, so one thing just to make sure it's really clear, nothing on this future land use map prohibits a city from working with the property owners to annex and expand their territory. In fact, as a city were to grow and expand its territory, it'd be appropriate in my mind to make additional modifications to the buffer. These really, as I see them, are kind of protection districts to allow those cities to kind of grow the way they want, and this county to kind of acknowledge. And so nothing will prohibit Malvern from annexing 2 miles out a humongous area and developing in that. The county doesn't get to unilaterally stop an annexation, so just something for clarification.
Thank you for the time.
Yes.
On your Lost Hills map there, in blue there, on 190th Street, I've got 50 acres of ground there approximately, that I'd like to see that out of ag and put in commercial to expend that blue. You got my bottom land in the Lost Hills.
And in the case of the green areas, this reflects generally what the current future land use map shows. And so if we want to identify any specific areas to change.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying to you, my piece of ground is bottom land, and you have it in the Lost Hills.
Oh, yeah, and if I made a little mistake, but what I did was this is how the future land use
Let
map
me show it to you.
shows today. Is there yeah, show me where. Maybe I can highlight it on this map. So I think maybe you're right here. Let's see, there's the railroad tracks. Oh, okay, you're right about here. Yeah, that's how the map shows it today. That might be a real reasonable one to pull out, because I would agree. Can I have this?
Yeah.
So that might be something you might say, hey, can we tweak that and put that as business park blue?
It's bottom land.
And be, just to be, I hate to take liberty, and that would be your request, that it be business park?
That would be great, yeah.
I don't know. Let's get past that.
I have one more question. In the yellow area on the map there, it looks to me like that when I heard you talk and he was gonna restrict it to 3 splits because of driveways and stuff like that, unless you do paved roads, water and sewer. It sounds like that, even though I like the map, I'm happy with that. But it sounds like in your wording, you take it back away where that you can't develop that land. And some of it would be impossible to probably get infrastructure there at this point in time to have sewer and water. And with our rural development and areas, it seems like you're doing what we like, but you're also taking it away. I talked to Richard about the map earlier, and he had some input on helping that get changed before we don't have that original map you showed. But it sounds like you kind of contradict what you can do by the wording that comes with it. Like if you have a parcel you want to split up out there in that area, and you're 2 miles from water, there's no sewer out there except out to Woodfield, I believe. There is some little water out that way, but I think there's quite a bit of that area out there that would conflict what we can do.
Do you remember which part of it that was that you,
It's, I've got 3 or 4 parcels in that yellow area.
no, I'm just thinking on here where you're talking about the access drives of it, that's more in like the commercial
That's commercial.
aspect of it. If you're gonna do a minor subdivision in the commercial industrial area.
No, in the yellow area.
The yellow,
I don't think we addressed that.
I'm not talking about the commercial. Ag residential is what I'm talking about.
residential.
I don't think we have a specific
Rural
policy talking about number of lot splits.
Yeah, just on
It
the
was about a
commercials.
frontage road in commercial.
Yeah.
If you have more than
For
3
commercial.
lots. Yeah, 3 commercials.
Yeah, just commercial.
That's not the case in the rural residential.
No.
We did not add a policy specific to that in rural residential, correct?
I can tell you guys one thing right now. I know Glenwood's gonna lose 10 or 15 kids out of our school district this year because of the new state laws and stuff like that. So I would tell you, I hope you don't do anything to stop the growth of our county. It's a fact. We know it. And so that's something that everybody needs to be aware of. Thanks for listening.
Can you pop, my name is Sandy Winton. Can you pop the new map back up there? The blue business park industrial on the left, kind of in the middle. Is that all, is the dark blue all of the corridor overlay?
So great question. So we do have the zoning, which is different than the land use map. And so, no, it is different. So that dark blue does not quite correspond with that commercial overlay. And I think that all warrants, and kind of like Matt talked about, I really agree with that as well. That warrants a fresh look to make sure it's doing what you want it to do and that encompasses the right area. Especially, you know, something that's truly industrial, well, that'd be a pretty hard zoning standard to meet. But in other cases, you're gonna wanna protect those commercial corners. So I think a fresh look at it's important, but it is different.
Appreciate that. I appreciate what Matt had to say about that needing another look, because I just feel like I appreciate you cutting that blue area down. It was way too big. The corridor overlay, I feel like is too big, but in the southwest corner of that, you're getting away from roads and you're getting deep into the farmland, and to expect somebody to put a building there and put brick on the front and do nice, pretty trees and all the buffer zone and everything that goes into it is just, it's excessive and it's gonna keep people from coming in and actually building there. I get it that it's along the Highway 34, the new road. Yep, I get the corridor layover or overlay being there, but I think it's just too extensive, and the rules and the regulations and the hoops that they have to jump through, it's just too much. It's excessive. So thank you for taking a fresh look at that.
One more question, if I could. On the blue, I think, going up on 195th Street there, can you tell what highway or what road you're cutting that blue off at? Is there, do you know what road that is?
If I may, I just, so I brought this.
Okay.
I suppose anybody else who wants to look at this closely. We can read that.
sir, did you want to speak? Did you want to speak, sir?
John, you've got another question. Sir, go ahead.
I'm Jeff Green, 17715 Alice. It's kind of the curved part of the upper blue area there. We're a Century Farm. And I think, the solar farm is a big thing for us. And I think there's some confusion about whether it's going to be allowed or not allowed with the industrial area. Again, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having it. I think it's a great idea to have a comprehensive plan, have people input it, kind of have a broader strategy. I think that's awesome. There's two very large solar developers. We're looking at several sections of land. So it's much bigger than the industrial area there. And I was a little confused. You said the industrial solar is what would be in industrial areas, but how about the agricultural area too?
So yes, according to Mills County Code, the way it is currently right now, utility scale solar is a conditional use in the ag zoning district, ag residential zoning district, and industrial district.
Okay, so I think that's good. I would encourage you to look at, hey, what areas are these two companies looking at? Because in DuPont County and Mills County, it's again, several sections, thousands of acres. And then I also work with the M&P levy district, which handles the levy from the northern line all the way down a little past Lambert Road, Old 34. And I think you probably need to look a little closer at the elevations there. The land to the east of Alice Road flooded in 11, flooded in 19. So there's quite a couple feet of difference there relative to where the river's at, make a huge difference. But again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Heather Gentleman, 17487 Hammond Avenue, PJ. So I'm glad you guys brought up about the corridor overlay that stretches really far west there on 34. I know in the beginning when we started talking about the comprehensive plan, it was discussed when we were at the Board of Supervisors meeting that overlay is going too far west. They would like to see it shrunk by a few business owners that are along 29 there. And then it also aligns to shrink that back to the east there where it's going on that curve on 34. On, what's it, policy 2 under goal 4, to have, city water and sanitation, things like that. There is no infrastructure that far west. So if we could shrink that up, that would be.
Hello, everybody. My name is Corey Lake. Can we go to that table again on sheet number 26, table 104? I guess we're already on it. Yeah. So I'm also the chair of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This is partially compatible and compatible versus special use, a need of a special use permit. Are we going to connect these together to make them the same verbiage because it gets confusing for people? I think that's kind of what you were saying, Alan, to a certain extent.
No, Matt was saying.
Okay. To where all of a sudden, this partially compatible. Trying to think what it's even called in our stuff right now, but just conditional use permit. Are we going to combine the two?
And if I may, just to clarify, we do need to be careful not to make that distinction where this has anything to do with a special use permit. What is kind of typical in comprehensive planning, there's no one right way or one rule to do this, is, we do like to start talking about how different land use categories, how we've colored up the future land use map, coincide with our zoning district regulations. And sometimes it's not perfectly clean. And so in some cases, it may be appropriate to zone something ag residential, in some cases not, but I wouldn't tie it at all to any kind of a conditional use permit process, because that is different. That is something in the purview of the Board of Adjustment. It's something that we actually do set conditions on. This really has to do with more of an analysis that you look at an area and say, you know what, this actually does make sense to be zoned ag residential, or no, there are some concerns we have, it doesn't make sense to zone it ag residential. So I would not want to use consistent language. And so we could either totally drop the partially compatible and make them all compatible. It was a way to give a little bit of flexibility to some commission recommendations that sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. And as a legislative act, both the Planning Commission and ultimately then the Board of Adjustment or Board of Supervisors has a lot of leeway on saying what's appropriate. So great question. And I thank you for giving us the opportunity to kind of clarify it. We need to really remove the thinking that has anything to do with the conditional use permit.
Okay, so going back to that, if it says partially compatible on that sheet, if I'm an applicant looking to do something on that sheet, what is required for me on a partially compatible?
To make a good argument to the Planning Commission, ultimately the Board of Supervisors, that I should be rezoned whatever zoning district I'm asking for.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not a standard by.
Okay,
In fact, I would, the more we write very specific language, the more we lock ourselves in a box. And in fact, I'd say in that case, get rid of the PC, partially compatible, and it either is or it isn't. But again, we might run into some situations where it's a little more of a gray area.
so if I looked at that board currently on that sheet or that table, if it's compatible, I'm not going in front of a board of adjustment.
No, sorry. Again, bifurcate the thinking. It has nothing to do with the board of adjustment. This is for making rezoning decisions. So if I have a piece of land, my property is shown as a rural residential from a land use category. It's not the same as zoning. From a land use category, what I can do is know that I could come see the county and make petitioner requests to the planning commission, ultimately onto the board of adjustment. That if I have my rural residential land use category, I could ask for ag zoning, because that could be compatible. I could ask for ag residential, because that could be compatible. What might be compatible is like village zoning, maybe. So I know that that'd be a little bit of a risk, but I have a little more of a guarantee that I'm gonna get rezoned for ag or ag residential. But maybe I could still ask for greenway overlay or some of these other ones. So it's a little bit of a guidance on what would be appropriate zoning. And that's a first step. Second step is building permit, subdivision, or if it's a special use permit, going through the board of adjustment for a special use permit. Your standard as board member, everything you're doing is a judicial act, so you're having to meet a test or a standard. Whereas rezoning or zoning decisions are more of a legislative act, there's a lot of discretion of a commission and of a board of supervisors. Clear as mud, I hope.
Yeah, it's very confusing for me, but that's okay. I think I get the gist of it. This is to either to get the zoning conditional use permits in order.
This is
We'll never
just
look at this
zoning,
again.
nothing to do with getting a permit or a special use permit, just zoning.
An applicant would never use this as a key.
Only for a rezoning, not for the next step of, say, getting approval of a wind farm.
Which would be this board.
Oh, sorry, solar farm, wrong county.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you asked that. I'd be happy to belabor that some more honestly, because that's a good one to think about.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't push that, sorry.
Oh, no.
It's okay. It's okay.
Other comments?
I got a question, you guys, on 180th Street out there, is that no longer zone commercial? West of Loves and BP?
So one thing we're not doing by any action today or by this land use plan is changing any zoning. So this is just the future land use plan from which future rezoning decisions could be based.
Okay, but can I still ask you a question? Does the blue, what road does that stop on going west of Love?
I'd have to look at the board you're looking at. So it's whatever it shows there.
I can't read.
I should grab my glasses too. I know county plan, zoning or land use planning is always hard. when There's such a large scale.
That's
This is
180.
Right here?
That's 180 of that.
Okay,
of course.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we did, in this area in particular, what you're talking about, we did pull back. We pulled back a big area here, we pulled back here, and we did do that too.
This area. It's farmland. There's nothing to it.
180th is
And
on
this,
north.
and this over here. And this is a
And one
road.
thing to do not, do acknowledge, that just because we show this with a land use categories of business, it doesn't preclude it, we're right to farm state. You can continue to farm, we don't have to
I get it.
rezone
It
it.
just
we can
puts
keep it
extra
ag.
restrictions on people.
Well, just-
It's not necessary.
Well, yeah, in fact, what would be the concern of the restriction?
If it's an overlay,
Oh, the
it's
overlay,
extremely
sure.
expensive.
This doesn't have.
I get it, but a lot of the overlay that needs to be fixed
Yeah.
is shrunk back in that same blue area.
Yep. I just want to make sure we're talking the same thing.
If you understand, it would make a difference.
And if I own the land, I'd probably want to more intensely.
So it does make.
Yeah. Okay. We were again, just commission talking about kind of this area and what is the appropriate amount to show as potential future business park. Of course, it can always be continued to be farmed, whatever its current zoning is, could be maintained, could be changed. Anybody else want to see this close up?
Any other public?
Ed Cambridge, 20703 Barris Road. On goal 1, policy number 2. The last meeting, I asked about the meaning of that. Require new residential development to connect to and be accessed by a paved road. That intended to restrict single acreage developments along gravel roads.
That was one thing in our last meeting, we were going to define what residential development exactly means.
I missed that.
Yeah, we did talk about that, and I think we also talked about, we were updating our subdivision chapter to make sure that everything is in line.
In other words, saying residential development means a subdivision.
Right. So, yeah, that's all part of what we're trying to do on that side of things. too.
Single or multi. Is that what it is? Residential development? Single or multi homes?
Yeah, I mean, basically residential development. So, yeah.
I apologize. That one I did miss. I now remember the conversation.
So, I apologize on that.
Can you explain what you're trying to say there? Is that to do any type of building or subdivision in the county? If it's not on a paved road, it's not allowed. Is that what it's saying?
I believe that'd be for any major or minor subdivisions. You would want them to be accessed from a paved road.
A minor subdivision could just be a 3 or 4 lot subdivision.
Correct. But do you want, that's when, and I don't know this part of the Mills County Code yet or not, but do you allow more than that off of a gravel road right now? Do you do minor subdivisions off of gravel roads?
If it's paved, if you pave the internal road, I believe. it can happen. You can do a major subdivision if if the actual subdivision is paved.
If the internal road is paved, you can have a gravel road leading up to it. So I think that would be the intention of what this is to make sure that if you're gonna put in a new paved road, you would want that coming from a paved county road.
Hasn't that really restricted Potawatomi County? I mean, they're just dying for lots up there. And if you're not on a paved road, you can't do a subdivision. I think it's just, at the builder trade meetings I've gone to, those builders are just starving for lots. They can't find any lots. And I think that helps prohibit the lots.
And that will, I believe, that stemmed from up until 2017. You could not do minor subdivisions off of seal coat roads. And now that's an exception that's been written in there, and you are seeing a lot more of those minor subdivisions pop up off of those seal coat roads to fill in a lot of those areas that are already developed. So if you have an area that has 3-4 houses in it, 1 or 2 others really wasn't gonna hurt the bunch. So there's a list of exceptions that have been written in there, but again, that's in like their subdivision ordinance aspect of it.
But that isn't that kind of saying, we've got this yellow area, but then you can't do much in there.
Because there's so many gravel roads in our county.
Yeah. Like we want to do a 20 lot subdivision off of a ridge in Mills County that falls off on both sides. It's in that yellow zone. Are you saying you can't do that? Is that what that says? Is that a contradiction or did that belong just with commercial?
And then, Matt, let me take the hit on
Yeah.
this one. I think that's a good question for the county to kind of weigh on. You know, on one hand, yeah, there's a desire for more rural residential lots, more development. But there is a high cost to having a lot of development on a gravel road. Gravel roads are not necessarily cheap to maintain, and the normal reason why we do them is they're a little cheaper to go in, but we have a lot less traffic. And so a 20 lot subdivision at a typical 10 car trips per household per day, you know, there's 200 new trips on a gravel road, especially in bad weather where the road's soft, that can be a real cost to the county long term. Now, if that's what folks want, and they kind of understand the cost of that level of development, great. But that's really why, you know, when you hire me, we bring that up. And so in some of the previous discussions was, is that what we want to see? Do we want new rural subdivisions served by gravel, or do we want them to be on hard surface roads? And frankly, I mean, that's ultimately a decision for the county.
Which kills the growth.
So one thing to kind of think about is long-term, the cost of doing business. And so typically, and it's not perfect or universal, single-family residential doesn't generally carry the tax load. The cost to provide service is generally higher than what they pay in taxes. So there is kind of a diminishing sum return. Now, with really expensive $1 million homes, it gets a lot better. But if we're gonna have some smaller homes, we tend to start to get into trouble. Often we look at more traditional residential development as like a loss leader for a community. We need the housing to help support some of the businesses that tend to really carry the tax load. And so I think it's kind of a balance act.
I would tell you in Mills County, the minimum cost of somebody to go to county is gonna be 400,000.
Yeah, and that does make a big difference. So, you know, we take the rural back, 200,000,
If we didn't have this type of growth, Mills County would probably still be, I don't know.
Yeah. And that's where I think this is good stuff for the community to debate,
I would
figure out what you
encourage
guys
the
want.
board to change that, make it clear that what you can and can't do.
Yeah. And whatever these policies say, though really that action step, kind of like Matt discussed, is any tweaks or edits or updates to the subdivision regulations.
And I'm gonna piggyback on that just a little bit. Listening to what Matt said at the beginning, and we'll use them as more affordable housing, but eventually turns into more moderate housing and expensive housing as it goes. That's people that come back to the community. Maybe it's people that their kids get their, in essence, their starter house and moves on to the next one. We've had a lot of conversations in the past with the board supervisors, with also the county engineer, that having subdivisions coming off like-kind roads should be like-kind, mainly due to the fact of snow removal, mowing, different things. If you have a gravel road and you put a paved subdivision off of that, now you have to have a gravel maintainer go by to have the truck come by with the salter and the sander for the concrete. So I would like to see that. Excuse me, I used the restroom for a second. I don't know where that's at in this. That would be one piece I'd like to see moved and spoke about more, especially having more input with our engineer, with the county board of supervisors, because to get people into this area, it's always been a cost. New subdivisions, the cost is tremendous. Gravel lot subdivisions, yes, there's more maintenance on them, but they're gonna be more cost effective for people bringing into this community, no doubt about it. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Can we go back to this map on your board where you have the yellow? With, I guess, the full scale. I think you've done a great job getting the rural residential out there. I think that's critical with going with Matt said also with our utilities. We spoke with the water board. We've almost possibility of looking at a loop. We're building on things in a very good manner. In the late 1990s, early 2000s, we did a tremendous amount of subdivisions off gravel roads. Some of them were private. We had an engineer that didn't like them. They got changed, but I think that helped. A lot of those people don't live there anymore, but they still live in the county. They live in maybe a nicer home possibly or something of the sort. But it's going to be very important to have something for everybody in Mills County. And I understand you're saying that, you know, we don't, our tax base and we don't make our budget from it. That's the only thing we have in Mills County. That's it. There's nothing else in Mills County that pays us, but residential housing.
Well, a facetious comment, we need more paved roads, is what we need,
That would be good.
right?
It's only one minute.
So I think just before you turn it over to the supervisors, you know, the area around Malvern, you know, as far as the rural residential, I think, you know, as far as the yellow. And with all the different questions, you know, there's no city council here from Malvern, no school board members from Malvern. I can't speak for Tabor. But there's a lot of things that seems like that needs to be digested here a little bit before you make a final recommendation to move on. I'm not saying it needs to be 2 months, 3 months. Like a 2 or 3 week thought process here on all great questions, great ideas. Just kind of, I would really like to see, and I don't know if the school board or the city of Malvern officials were aware of this meeting real thorough, you know, I don't know. But I think I think everybody just needs I don't know if it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just kind of digest a lot of these ideas, thoughts.
I know as far as Malvern, Joe George was part of this.
I'm sorry, what?
Joe George, the city manager there in Malvern, was a part of this process. So as far as the meetings and things like that. So,
Has
so we did
the
have,
school board been,
trying to think of some of the
you know,
meetings.
at one meeting I was here with Joe and I don't know, just like to see a little bit more thought into, or give a little more chance on that, you know, going forward.
Okay. Okay.
Before you make it, you know, before tonight, you know, you walk, turn it over. I just think there needs to be a little digestion here. Let's think a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not saying 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, a little bit of time, you know, to wrap your head around. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments or questions?
I guess I have one, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure my full thought process on this, but I'm just sitting here looking at Glenwood and then there's Malvern. And, you know, we don't have a lot of space around Glenwood to grow commercially or residentially, other than maybe going east on that eastern corridor. So I don't know if something maybe needs to be changed between connecting the yellow to the Malvern. Because if people wanted to grow and open up that Highway 34 corridor and it's restricted to ag only, they wouldn't be able to do it. Like I said, haven't fully thought out that thought process, but it just seems like there's a break between separating Malvern and Glenwood, and maybe it needs to come together with a use that could go either way, residential or commercially.
Sure.
Sandy, can I ask you a question? Are you meaning like go on both sides of Highway 34 and go all the way to Malvern? Is that what you're talking about? Extending it all the way to Malvern, or how far south would you go?
Not just by the highway. In case,
Just along the highway?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
To open that Highway 34 corridor up. You know, there's talk and hopefully there's still talk about making that a Super 2 highway, because it's so hard to get around people.
Right.
And it's just, you know, and so if they open that up and made it a Super 2 highway, eventually going clear past Red Oak and beyond, it would be easier if that was more able to be flexible.
Okay.
And one thing along there.
So like a corridor overlay. Or
Well, no, not another overlay. We've got plenty of those. A more flexible
Highway
land
frontage.
use right there.
Highway frontage. Highway frontage.
Sandy, just to clarify, are you looking for the industrial part to stretch out further east? Or are you looking just strictly residential being in that
Yeah,
area?
that's why I was
between-
saying, I hadn't thought this whole thought process out, so I was hoping you all would
I
get what I'm
understood
thinking and take it farther.
To say orange.
I was thinking either if people want to build toward Malvern to connect, you know how cities grow and they, you know, build a
Turn it in.
subdivision out between, like, what, they have Cedar Hills, and that's halfway in between. Yeah, I know Trash Mountain doesn't help that mountain.
No,
But
it's just bad traffic there.
yeah, yes, but if they were to come off that highway, if they did want to build outside of Malvern, but closer, you know, between us, then they would be able to. Or if commercial wanted to open up and go, they would be able to. I don't
Amy,
know
just
how you
real
do
real
that.
quick for what you're thinking on that, right? Is that is kind of, that could be one argument towards having it in the green area right now, because it's just another step that a person would have to take. But it would be just one step to come in and ask, say, hey, I would like to change the future land use map because we have this proposed development out there. And so it's not that it's not like it couldn't ever happen or it wouldn't ever happen. It is one more step that they would have to take to come before the planning commission and say, could we please change this? And that could coincide with the application for the rezoning of the property. So you could be asking for your future land use map change along with your rezoning of the property and still moving along with the process of
It'd
it.
be a pretty big
And-
hurdle though, as you roll that off, it's just one more, exactly what you said, well, it's just one more hurdle they can look at. Well, you don't know who you're dealing with, or, it's not always that, it's just one more thing that can change. Sometimes it don't.
I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, if we put that onto everything, then you would have nothing on the map, right? Because it could be potentially seen as one more thing. So if we're looking at, and that's the ideal of, and I like what Mark was pointing out around the communities, and there's an argument to be made to come back. So you have your original urban fringe buffer on there. So you could potentially come back around and you could also add another layer on that of the rural residential, each one of them. And it's where it's a two-stage piece of the growth out. So and then as the city grows out, don't think as your urban fringe doesn't go away as the city annexes in and goes out. Your urban fringe keeps pushing out. That next area keeps pushing out along with
So
that.
is Glenwood a 2 mile buffer on that? It is, is that correct?
We're only showing 1 mile. 2 miles, you can just kind of imagine it. It was a pretty large circle and it was a desire to.
He asked Glenwood.
Yes,
specifically.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said Glenwood is 2 miles.
Yeah.
Minus Les Hills,
My question
minus
is,
the certified site, sorry.
So how come, or in the future, I would guess consider changing Malvern to 2 miles? And I have no idea, I'm just throwing something out there, but if I'm thinking, and I don't, Red Oak used to be, and, somebody brought up the Super 2, which it absolutely needs to be done, because I live real close to Highway 34, like NASCAR, but at 7 in the morning and 5 at night, you better be thinking, but Red Oak used to, have a lot going on, but anyway, down the road, I know they try and they're, and whatever they got going on, but why, okay, so even east on Highway 34, and it's gonna be beyond my lifetime, I would think you would go like a mile or something this, width, north and south. And I know you get over to the Nishnabotna, of course, that's low. But I think it's kind of a snub to that whole, because there's so many people that come from Red Oak, Stanton, Alaska, commuting. Now, I don't know if that stops somebody from pick anything along there, just 2 miles, more. But who knows what goes there, business of some sort. It just seemed, or
No, but you made a good point in there where you said, not, whether it's not in your lifetime. So it's the cycle of when does this come back up again, right? When does the county pick this map back out and look at it and say, are we meeting the expectations of that? Are we going? Are we gonna set that at 5 years? Are we gonna set that at 10 years? You go out 15 years. So there is that cycle that the map should come back up along with the pieces of it and get reviewed again and go back for the commission. Are we still okay? Yep, we're okay. Then let's move it along. And you can make your little changes that go with it to show current conditions on there. But it's not, again, it's not a map that you set up there and you think, well, 50 years down the road, you know, housing could be way out here and you're telling them that they can't do it right now. Well, this map will look totally different in 50 years, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. It's gonna look
So
different.
is
than
it
what
set,
is.
okay, we revisit all this and is that is it a 5-year deal? Is it 10-year? What's the process with that?
And that's what I'm here to do, is to make sure that all those cycles get put in place. So then that way they come back up and the policies and the procedures are all written there. So irregardless of who's sitting in the office, that these plans will come back before and be re-updated and re-shown to the public, and everybody gets their chance to put public input back into it. And then it doesn't just sit kind of stagnant out there. And looking back at what the county had done before, I think that there are conversations that probably do need to be had about the road surface types and what the rationale was for at the time. It looks like when the last one got done, there was a large talk about the private roads and why the private roads went away. And so I think that those conversations, if they need to be rehabbed, or like surface type roads need to be discussed with the engineer and have more input from the engineer on this. And that's something that can be done. But for land use wise, when you're looking at this, that's kind of what the goal of the map is, to show, you know, at least 5 years out, and then be able to come back and revisit it again, update the map, go another 5 years. See where it's at, but you know, there are those changes that we talked about tonight that were good points out. You know, to add a little bit of the rural residential areas around each one of the small communities. And be able to keep the housing growth happening. I mean, certainly don't want anything to shut down housing growth that's there.
Any other comments, questions?
I just want to maybe point out something too, John. Thanks for the input, everybody. If I misspeak, go ahead and tell me, but I think when we close the public hearing, then that's the last time the public will be able to give input on it. So if there's anything that you guys are missing or wanting to say, I think now would be the time, and then we have to hash it out with the group or whenever, so.
Well, I would sure like to see them get rid of the paved roads required throughout the whole yellow section to do any type of development or subdivision on, or if not, you might as well turn the yellow section back to green. We don't have that many paved roads.
When we have an engineer and people that are listening and thinking that there's a potential that it's a better scenario to not have paved road off a gravel road, or an asphalt road off a gravel road, or a concrete road off an asphalt road, or an asphalt road off a concrete road. Like kind of things. It's the same snow plows, it's the same, everything that goes through those things. So.
Yeah, potentially, maybe that doesn't even need to be put in the land use plan. Maybe that's more of our subdivision ordinance type of a, you know, maybe the land use plan doesn't need to bring that up, but.
Right. I mean, this is the future land use plan. It's not the zoning. So.
But one thing I would tell you is, look, you want to close the public hearing, or do we?
Yeah, if there's no other public comment, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing portion. Get into board discussion.
So one thing that, you know, when the previous meeting that we had, and I think it's all been good communication, and I think the board is full of people that will do some of this stuff and understand it, but you know, policy number 10 on goal number 4, it talks about, you know, update the county zoning regulations to reflect the recommendations within the future land use plan. So the map that we're seeing now isn't that much different than our zoning map that we have. The previous land use map that we dealt with last meeting pretty much changed our whole last 15 years of zoning in the county. The map that we're looking at today It seems to be like what Matt was talking about, we're revisiting it and potentially doing some changes, but not monster changes. And I think that makes a lot more sense. But that policy number 10, I mean, this land use map needs to mirror our zoning map in the future.
We hope you get it somewhat right. Doesn't have to, you wouldn't, doesn't have to exactly mirror it, but I'm sure hoping that. the right
Guidance to
pieces- Yeah, the guidance to it.
And I also think, Matt, the goals, the changes that you have here, you know, I think they're good points. I'd like to maybe see it spelled out, you know, to where, you know, it's totally, when we, I think when we get this land use map closer to the finish line, I think you'll find that there won't be a crowd. You know, I think that's when we feel like we're about there. We're about there to where you don't see just coming in here kind of talking and not as big of meetings, I would assume.
Comments regarding?
I just think for me that there's been a lot of very good recommendations, what Matt said and what everybody here has said. I would want to see a lot of those recommendations in writing before just saying that nothing will be forgotten and the conversation won't be lost.
What?
I mean, same, you know, I've got 15 different things noted that we would like to adjust before
We go by.
forward.
Chair, if I might, so what I think I may be hearing collectively is what if we update the future land use chapter, the plan? We incorporate some of the comments or the comments Matt has made related to the policy considerations and goals, as well as some of the public feedback. Were there any specific changes to the map you were wanting to see from what we're currently showing? I know Mr. Hughes brought up a little area here.
Right.
It's maybe not in the Les Hills.
I don't know that I necessarily would want to see changes specifically, but I would like to see like the zoning and the quarterly overlay, like how all those three things all line up, where those two other things line up with this map, just to have it all on, you know, in one handbook to see it all at the same time.
So prepare an update, get that to you, and make sure it includes a current zoning map. Do you want to have this at your next regular meeting for continued review?
When is that? When is that?
Second Tuesday.
It's the first Tuesday.
Oh, we do the first, well, then I don't like it.
Real quick on the map part of it for the commission, with that point that was pointed out to us, and it's definitely not unheard of, is would you like to see what this map looks like if we added on a half-mile boundary around each one of these small communities? This would be on top of the urban fringe. You add on the rural residential all the way around those.
So you're just gonna kind of make it a bullseye, give everything a yellow ring around it.
Right, for the small communities, because Tabor's kind of almost already got it, except for towards the east there, it gets a little short. Malvern doesn't have any, you know, none of the other communities. Silver City's got a little bit up around it on there. And I could try to find out from each of the small communities, you know, where they're. Cause I know, Joe told me from Malvern that they are redoing their future land use map right now as well. To try and see how we coincide with them, but for us, it would really, the urban fringe buffer is kind of a catch-all. As the city annexes in, they can change it into whatever they want to. But then it would just give a little bit of a rural residential a little bit further out around each one of them.
And if I heard you correct, as they annex or grow, the ring just grows with that growth. Is that
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it pushes out with that.
Just think of it almost as a holding zone to say, before you guys approve anything in here, let's make sure it works with what Malvern's thinking. So that we don't put something on their doorstep that messes them up on their future development. And we'd started out at the 2 mile because they have that statutorial authority to review subdivisions out 2 miles. But it just seemed larger on those other ones. So back to Matt's comment, yeah, how about a ring around each one?
But kind of in theory, right now, it's set up as a protection from growth into them versus them growing out into the growth.
You know, one thing you definitely see in other growing areas is sometimes that county development actually prohibits the city from growing.
Yep.
Because then they have to kind of leapfrog over it, and then who pays for that sewer extension or road extension?
Yeah, I mean, you could put it all into the light green and the city would just annex it in.
They're gonna take it all anyways.
Yeah, they're gonna take it all anyway. It's always kind of a little bit of an arm wrestling match because small communities are definitely gonna take an interest in everything 2 miles out. And that does become a little bit of so if you got somebody 1.5 miles out and they're just trying to add a house, they're just doing a farmstead split, they just wanna, the kids wanna move back out of the farm, whatever it may be. You may really have to go in and do some jockeying with the city councils to get them to allow that to happen, even though, it really isn't gonna affect them for that part of it. But right now, there's just a lot of interest in that 2 mile area that each one of the communities have. And I do believe it's probably all generated from the turbine discussion that went all across Southwest Iowa with the windmills looking in those areas that they want to protect them as much as they can. But I think that adding that ring in there, it'll be good for them because in the long run, the city's gonna grow whatever the easiest way it is for them to get their services put in. The cost of that isn't going down and it's just becoming more and more expensive. And it's the regulations on their lagoons to, their wastewater, to even their water. I mean, the small towns, they're even struggling with the water out there and it's a battle for them, but so we certainly don't want to hamper that.
So, Matt, do you see a reason for us to meet the first Tuesday in April, or do you think we could push it to the first Tuesday in May?
We need to do it.
How would you want to go that long?
It's only like 3 weeks. from
Yeah, it's a
now.
lot of work for them to do and.
Oh, you
and
mean
it's
as far as
gonna
it
work.
is.
I guess that's a correct
It won't
question.
take us long.
Okay.
We'll take long.
Yeah, I mean, that'll send me some, you redline it up, I'll make it happen.
All right.
Yeah, we can meet that timeline.
Was that another public meeting or just?
So-
It's public, but no public.
And what I would encourage is really from a noticing standpoint, if you guys continue this public meeting to state this certain date, so that's April 9th.
April 2nd.
Oh, I'm sorry, April 2nd. And then what I would encourage, because I think it'd be fair, is that you reserve the right to, and I would, reopen the public hearing for comment. Because I think that'd be, people want to show up and talk.
Sounds good to me. Now you got a voice again.
Well, okay, so if you have it the same night, which I understand everybody's extremely busy. But then, okay, so somebody. If you had it a week ahead, you could, I don't know where I'm going.
They can also, they can always submit comments to building and zoning and they bring the written comments to the board.
Is that conflicting with another meeting or something?
Well, I've got Iowa Jazz Championships on the 2nd. So
Oh,
That's
I'll be
also
in-
that one. It's
I'll be in Ames.
Easter break ends on the 1st.
Yeah,
Okay,
So that's why.
gotcha.
yeah. So
Well, I mean, Matt, I guess you and I, we, we serve at your leisure. You guys tell us what you want.
And I think Sandy made a good point with the industrial thing going to Malvern. I think Malvern had to have a 2 mile. I can't make that comment.
Yeah, no more comments. We're close on that.
Okay.
It'd be good to see what Joe has. Joe's
We can revisit the date,
April
but
9th, not
you want to do the
2nd.
9th?
I wanna do the 9th.
You pick a day, I'll be there.
Well, the only issue is if they pick the 9th, then the next week they have ZBA.
That's fine.
Okay. That's why we've always split it, the first and the third Tuesdays was, so we weren't back to back with P and Z and ZBA.
Okay. You good with the 9th?
Yes.
On the 9th.
9th? Okay. 9th.
I just know today's the 12th.
All right.
Chris, thanks for working with us and
Yeah.
and looking at things. And
Yeah, thank you.
At the end of the day, I want to make sure we're getting you the plan you want that you're comfortable recommending to the board.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Okay. Good motion to table the comprehensive plan for discussion until April 9th. Continue the discussion.
He said,
Did you get a second?
reserve a right to open up.
Did you get a second?
No.
I'll second.
Yep.
Those in
And that
favor?
was the conversation.
Aye.
Right, but I think he said we want to make sure to put that on there. On our things.
I don't-
I was gonna say, yeah, you did a really good job. Nice.
That's just.
Well, it's like.
Joe said.
Change the agenda.
I thought you were saying